Welcome back to Box Office Maniacs and the Big Four.
BAM!
The Big Four.
Just 4 months of big blockbuster films. BAM! Yep, this is it, people. And we're still these are the movies that just came out in May still, even though you've probably been watching these reviews later and who knows when they're going to post it. But whenever they get posted, these are just the May films of right.
These are just the May films of May.
And tonight, we will be reviewing a movie that I've been waiting a long time to see. It's like 2 years now.
Yeah, too long. 2 years too long.
Way too long. And that is, of course, Star Trek Into Darkness.
Now, shall we begin?
Alright, when J.J. Abrams brought out the first Star Trek, I mean, come on.
Prepare to fire all weapons.
I like this ship. It's exciting.
Space is disease and danger, wrapped in darkness and silence.
Buckle up.
Live long and prosper.
Come on, Vince. I mean, it was incredible science fiction, incredible Star Trek. They knocked it out of the park. I mean, it was everything every Star Trek fan could ever want in a film, and it was amazing. And I mean, it was as good a reboot that you will ever probably find, George Lucas.
Yes, it was amazing. The thing that I absolutely loved about the first Star Trek film was that it added everything that I ever thought was missing from Star Trek. They put into it.
And I am pretty much a lifelong Star Trek fan, I can tell you, because my mom grew up watching Star Trek. She'd tell us stories about how we were in the crib and Star Trek was on. My dad's at work and she's like watching Star Trek in the house by herself, wondering what the heck this is. And at that point, she became a Star Trek fan, and she's still a huge Star Trek fan. And because of that, I really didn't become a Star Trek fan until The Next Generation. At that point, I watched every episode of Next Generation for every year it was on. Every Saturday night at 10:30, I was in front of the TV watching The Next Generation. I never missed it for like the 6 or 7 years it was on. That's where I became the huge Star Trek fan.
I actually just recently saw an interview with J.J. Abrams where he's talking about him and Star Trek and a little bit of Star Wars.
When I was a kid, I never liked Star Trek when I was a kid. Growing up, I always thought it was, honestly, I couldn't get into it. My friends loved it, and I would try, and I'd watch episodes, but it always felt too philosophical for me. And we tried to, some of the writers love Star Trek. I was not really a fan. My producing partner never saw it. Right. So when we were all happy, it felt like that was the way to go. And this movie that we did, the goal was to make a movie for moviegoers, not just for Star Trek fans. And it's weird, because Star Trek's my favorite show of all time. But for some reason, Star Trek never clicked for me until I started working on it, and I fell in love with it.
Oh, really? So you went back and watched all the ones, and then...
Yes, and also getting to understand the characters, the archetypes, the dynamics.
Right.
It made me appreciate it more.
Yeah.
Basically, him saying that is exactly the way I felt about Star Trek all my life. I didn't really care for the series. I actually got more into the movies than I ever did the series, and I've become more of a Star Trek fan now than I ever been.
So we get Star Trek 2 finally after all these years. And let me tell you a little story, Vince, before I get into the review.
It's story time with David Graves.
I went to go see Furious 6 at this theater called the Depere. And it was a sneak preview, and the theater screen we went and seen it in was awesome. I mean, it was like huge high-back chairs they had, all leather, recliner, gigantic screen, amazing sound. It was a really amazing theater. So I told Becky, my wife, I was like, we're going to go back to this theater and see Star Trek, because I've been waiting such a long time to see this movie. I want to see it in style. So we made a special trip out there to Depere just to go see Star Trek. And they put us in theater number 12. and the screen is about the size of my computer screen here. And it had about maybe 10 chairs in there. The seat next to my wife looked like the Hulk had sat in it. The cushion was broken out, was laying on the floor, and then halfway through the movie, my armrest fell off. It's just like fell off on the floor. So I'm picking my armrest up, looking. I was like, I'm trying to put my armrest back on, so I had something to put my elbow on instead of just like a metal spike that's sticking up out of the floor. And it's just like, it was a horrible movie experience. Horrible theater, horrible movie experience.
The arm of the chair fell apart. I love it.
It fell off, man. It just completely fell off on the floor. I had to pick it up. I told Becky, I was like, maybe I should take this home as a souvenir. I should have took it with me. I really should have brought it here and I could have showed you the armrest.
That would have been awesome.
So anyway, back to Star Trek. The second, I went into seeing the second movie with 0. And I'm talking, I don't know how I managed it, but I went in there with 0. I'm talking a big 0 spoilers. I had no clue as what this movie was about. None. I didn't even know. I knew from the trailer it was about some crazy guy. I knew things blew up. And I knew the Enterprise was coming out of the water. That's the only 3 things I knew.
I watched the first trailer. I think I watched the second trailer. And that was about it. My wife and I didn't want to watch any more of those because we wanted to be completely surprised in seeing Star Trek Into Darkness.
And I was. Just totally... I mean, this is another perfect summer popcorn action film. Like Furious 6 was. I mean, you go in there and just be prepared to be blown away by this.
And I was totally blown away by it. I loved this film. Absolutely loved it. I loved it as much as the first one.
I would actually say it was even better than the first.
For action, yes, it was. It was better than the first one.
Something I was explaining to my wife about sequels. This is what I think about a sequel when I go see a movie. First movie is always setting up the characters, getting you to know the characters, and there's a big chunk of the film dedicated to that. But, the sequels to these movies, that's where it needs to impress you, because you already know the characters. You already know the plots, you know the stories, you know the ships, you know everything. And here is a movie that's going to blow you away, and that's what the sequel needs to do in these films. Now just freaking blow me away, and that's what it did.
Exactly. I totally agree with that. One thing I expect with sequels is to be, because I know they can do it, I know with the right director and the right writers and the right people involved, they can do that. They can make a great sequel that is just as good as the first one, if not better. But I always look to the sequel also to be better than the last film, to raise the bar. And that's what I kind of expect to see with sequels. I don't always get that. This one, I didn't get that, but at least I got a film that was just as good as the first film.
I disagree. I think it was better in the first film. I just think the characters, the villain here, not giving any spoilers out, but it really surprised me about what the story was about. I wasn't expecting it, but I was totally shocked. I was like, oh my God. But my God, that was some of the, my God.
Now, see, that's another thing, Dave, is you mentioned about the characters and them setting up the characters in the first film and all of that, and then, of course, the story. You're mentioning the story. But in the second one, I expect to see an adventure. I expect to see them do something outside of what they started with, and that's exactly what I got with this film, was an actual Star Trek adventure. They finally went on an actual Star Trek adventure, and they got away from, oh, well, this is Captain Kirk, and we're reintroducing him, and this is Mr. Spock, and you got away from all that. You're finally, it's this crew, and you're settled in with this crew, and now they're on their first real adventure.
I could not agree more with that. I mean, this was a Star Trek extravaganza action film. The story here is, I think, better than the first movie. I just think it has a better story. And what I loved about this is that J.J. Abrams has managed to make a Star Trek film that doesn't take place in the Star Trek universe. It's its own alternate reality of the Star Trek universe. So even if some things happened in the past Star Trek films that happen in these films are going to happen differently because it's an alternate reality. And that by itself is really fun to watch because, you know, some of it could still be the same, but it's going to change because they changed it in the first movie. It makes this one even more interesting because you don't know what's going to happen.
When my wife and I and my kids all went to see this film, the film that was letting out before we went into the theater, there was somebody coming out, and my wife asked him, "Well, was it good? Did you like it?" And the guy actually said, "Well, if you're a real Star Trek fan, there's some things that happen in it that you're going to be disappointed with, but I was all right." You know, and once I went and saw the film and came out, I was thinking, you know, that was the stupidest thing he could have said. Because, like you said, Dave, this is an alternate Star Trek.
Exactly.
Yes, there's things that's going to happen like the original, but it's going to happen in a different way. That's what a reboot is also.
And they did it in such a smart way that it's a reboot and it's all new, but there's a reason why it's all new, because you've seen the first film. It's changed everything. It's the same characters, but they're an alternate version of the characters, and everything is different. As amazing job as J.J. Abrams did with this, I can't imagine what the Star Wars film is going to be. I mean, I just can't imagine how incredible that's going to be.
I remember the fans were like, yeah, all right, cool. You know, they were all for J.J. Abrams doing this, but now it seems like it's sunk in, and people are going, "Oh, I don't know. You know, I don't know about J.J. Abrams doing this." Well, this should put any of that fear to rest, really. I think he's going to do a phenomenal job with the next Star Wars film.
As you notice, he's really good with characterizations and characters, and he's really, really good with action sequences. He knows his action sequences. And, you know, I could not be more excited to see what they're going to do with Star Wars after seeing this movie. And, yeah, I mean, this is, if you're a Star Trek fan, you know, you'd be hard-pressed not to love this film. I mean, if you come out of it and you're like, then, you know, you're not a Star Trek fan. You're a Star Trek fan. I mean, this is great, people. If you like all the characters and ships and, you know, space battles and just everything you could possibly imagine is jammed into this film, it's amazing.
You know, I wasn't that big of a Star Trek fan, but after seeing what he did with these films and putting in the things that I really thought needed to be in Star Trek, and obviously he thought needed to be in Star Trek, that's exactly what I wanted to see, and it's given me everything I could want. So, yeah, I'm a fan of Star Trek, of these Star Trek films, if anything.
And what are you going to give this, Vince?
I would definitely give this movie the ball!
Oh yeah, I mean it's exploding. It's I don't know if the summer films can continue to be this good. Now we have, you know, Iron Man, that was pretty good. Then you got Furious 6, that was great, and now you got this, that's great. I mean, I don't know how much more I can take this summer, Vince.
Well, Furious 6 came out after this, Dave.
Whatever, it's still freaking great. I've seen it before this. I can't help if everybody's behind me, Vince. I'm leading the pack. BAM!
It's life, Jim, but not as we know it. Not as we know it. Not as we know it. It's life, Jim, but not as we know it. Not as we know it. Captain.